They laughed when I walked away from the family empire. They called me a failure for building something on my own. But the empire they mocked was about to belong to me. The golden light from the chandeliers of the Crestmore Country Club shimmered across the marble floors during the annual Delgado Family Gala. I smoothed the wrinkles in my navy-tailored suit, fully aware of how understated it looked among a sea of couture gowns, silk ties, and vintage watches. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. At 38, I was considered the family's lost potential, a polite euphemism for failure. "Sebastian, this you are." My cousin Claudia's voice rang out with the kind of polished confidence that only came with a $300,000 bonus and a corner office. He floated toward me in a fitted emerald tie, a recent promotion to senior executive at Delgado Global Solutions, practically radiating off his. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. "We were just going over everyone's highlights from the year," he chirped, looping his arm through mine. I forced a smile, resisting the urge to check my phone. An urgent message about tomorrow morning's $1,400,000,000 acquisition was waiting. One that Claudia had signed off on nervously several times in the past month. "Hello, Claudia." Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. "Congratulations on the promotion," I said with practiced warmth, silently recalling the confidential files sitting in my briefcase. Files that had come directly from Claudia's legal team, stamped urgent. "Thank you, darling," he said, barely brushing my cheek in a faux embrace. His perfume was expensive, overly floral, and entirely too strong. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. "Surprised you even heard, considering how independent you've been lately," he said. Independent like it meant unemployed. He motioned toward a circle of polished relatives nearby. "We've just been chatting about the year's accomplishments. Matteo got tenure at Stanford. Leela just opened his 4th boutique in Soho. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. And of course, I'm leading the Delgado Tech merger with Easton Industries." Just then, Aunt Marcella, my father's sister and Claudia's mother, appeared beside us, a flute of champagne in hand and judgment in his eyes. "And what about you, Sebastian? Still doing that consulting thing?" The way he said consulting made it sound like I was hawking prepaid cell phones in a mall kiosk. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. "Yes, still consulting," I replied evenly, sipping my sparkling water. I thought of the global meeting set for tomorrow, the final green light moment, where I would sit across from Claudia's executive team and approve the terms that would either save or swallow Delgado Tech whole. 10 years. Claudia amused, shaking his head slowly, like he was mourning a loss. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. 10 years since you walked away from that prestigious position at Sterling & Company. And for what? A boutique consultancy nobody's ever heard of. I thought of my private villa in Lake Co., the townhouse in London, and the tech startup I'd quietly bought out last month. None of it under my name. The real power of Vanguard strategies lay in its anonymity. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. As founder and CEO, I had grown it into one of the most discreet and influential forces in global corporate strategy, operating behind hell entities and layers of holding companies. "We're doing just fine," I said, letting the edges of a smile slip through. "How's the merger coming? By the way, I heard Eastston's board was pushing back on the proposed equity split. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy." The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Claudia's polished expression faltered for half a beat. "It's under control," he said quickly. "But I wouldn't expect you to understand billion-dollar negotiations." Before I could answer, our cousin Raphael, newly made junior partner at a mid-sized law firm, sidled up with a glass of bourbon in hand. Sebastian still in that tiny office on Lincoln Street. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. "You know we're hiring if you're ever interested in something more stable. Admin support, perhaps I could put in a word." I bit back a laugh. Just last week, Raphael's firm had pitched their services to Vanguard, hoping to land a role in the Easton merger. They had no idea the CEO in the video call, blurred background, understated tone had been me. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. "That's very kind, Raphael," I said, smiling sweetly. "But I'm quite happy where I am." And I was very happy, in fact, because tomorrow they'd all find out who really signed the contract that saved their legacy. "Honey," Aunt Marcella interjected. His voice sugar-coated with that fake concern only family can perfect. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. You really shouldn't settle for just being comfortable. Look at Claudia. He's about to close the biggest deal in Delgato Global's history. The merger with Easton Industries will make his career. If only they knew. Easton was one of my hell companies created specifically to pressure Delgato Global into a corner right where Vanguard Strategies could step in as the savior. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Claudia's career-making merger was actually the final move in a plan I'd spent years constructing. A plan designed not just to expand my firm's influence, but to show my family exactly who they'd been overlooking all this time. Speaking of the merger, Claudia said, checking his rose gold watch. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow with the consulting team." He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. They're just advisors, of course, but corporate likes us to humor them. He gave me a bright, patronizing smile. "You should stop by sometime, Sebastian. See what a real business looks like." I swirled the last of my water and placed the glass down calmly. "Actually," I replied, "I've got a meeting of my own tomorrow, a signing ceremony, in fact. Rather important contract. When the trap closed, this would be no way out." Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. Raphael, ever the opportunist, grinned. "Finally landed a client for that little consulting firm of yours." I met his gaze and smiled. Not smugly, just knowingly. You could say that. Tomorrow's going to change a lot of things. As I slipped out of the ballroom, I heard Claudia's voice behind me, hushed but cutting. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. Poor Sebastian, still playing pretend after all these years. What a waste of potential. In the quiet of my car, I finally checked the email buzzing in my pocket. It was from Matteo, my senior advisor. "Everything's ready. Delgato's board is desperate. They'll sign anything. They still don't know we hold every card." Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. I drove through the city to my penthouse, a place my family didn't know existed, and spent the evening reviewing the final terms. The merger contract was long, dense, and beautifully engineered. Buried in it were clauses that would shift strategic control of Delgado Global directly into Vanguard's hands and ultimately mine. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Claudia thought he was closing a deal. In reality, he was delivering his company, our family's legacy, to the cousin he'd always treated like background noise. In my home office, I opened the secure cabinet and pulled out a thick folder labeled Project Delgado. Inside were years of notes, timelines, comments, even family interactions, all lined up next to pivotal business moves. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every smug remark every time they called me ambitious, in a cute way. Every backhanded compliment was part of the data that brought us highs. I picked up my phone. "Sarah," I said to my assistant, "make sure the penthouse conference room is prepped for 900 a.m. Also, let's have the photographs ready. I want every second of tomorrow documented." When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. "Yes, Mr. Phoenix," he replied without missing a beat. That name, Mr. Phoenix, never appeared at family dinners, but tomorrow it would be engraved on the final page of a billion-dollar contract. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but smile. Revenge didn't need to be cruel or loud. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. Sometimes it just needed a signature line that read, "Sebastian Vega, CEO, Vanguard Strategies." The next morning, I stepped into my private elevator at the heart of Manhattan's most prestigious office tower. My tailored charcoal Armani suit, never worn to family functions, fit like armor. As I rose to the 62nd floor, the city lit up beneath me, unaware it was about to witness a quiet reckoning. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The elevator doors opened to floor-to-ceiling glass in a perfectly set boardroom. "Good morning, Mr. Phoenix," Sarah greeted, placing a folder on the table. "Let's begin," I said. And just like that, the game changed forever. "Good morning, Mr. Phoenix?" Sarah greeted me as I stepped out of the private elevator into Vanguard's executive wing. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. After 10 years, he was one of the few people who had witnessed both sides of my life. Sebastian Delgado, the family failure, and Sebastian Vega, the man behind one of the most powerful consulting firms on the planet. "The Delgado Global team is in the main conference room," Sarah added, walking alongside me. "Your cousin Claudia is vocal about the delay. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy." The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. I glanced at my reflection in the brushed steel walls. Gone was the quietly dressed Sebastian from last night's family gala. Today I wore a tailored suit in deep charcoal sharp lines and quiet confidence. Today I was Sebastian Vega. "How long have they been waiting?" I asked, already knowing the answer. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. 20 minutes, Sarah said with a glint of mischief. "Mr. Delgado has mentioned his critical executive schedule approximately a dozen times." Well then, I adjusted my jacket. Let's not keep them waiting any longer. The main conference room was a glass and marble monument to power. The sweeping views of Midtown Manhattan framed the room like a painting. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. Claudius stood at the far end mid-rand, his tone sharp with entitlement. "It's completely unacceptable," he snapped. "I don't care who this consultant is. This level of unprofessionalism is inexcusable." Raphael sat nearby, looking vaguely uncomfortable, probably unsure why he was this at all. My uncle Alejandro Claudia's father, and the CEO of Delgado Global, was seated at the center of the table with two board members beside him. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. Finally, Claudia snapped as the doors opened. "Do you have any idea who I—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. His expression shifted in rapid succession. Outrage, confusion, disbelief. "Sebastian." Raphael stood so fast he knocked over his water glass. "What are you doing?" he said. "This is a private board meeting." Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. I walked to the head of the table with quiet, steady confidence, setting my briefcase down with a crisp click. The silence was sudden and heavy. "Good morning," I said, pressing a button on the panel. The room's screens descended from the ceiling, displaying the Vanguard Strategies insignia. "Apologies for the delay. Let's begin the meeting regarding the Delgado-Easton merger." He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. My uncle finally found his voice. "Sebastian, this is not appropriate. We're highs to meet with AM Phoenix. Wise is he I am," I said, opening my folder. "Sebastian M. Phoenix, founder and CEO of Vanguard Strategies, and, as of this morning, the majority shareholder of Easton Industries." Dead silence. Claudia's face drained of all color. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. His expensive dress suddenly looked like a child playing grown-up. Raphael rifled through the documents Sarah was now handing out, scanning with rising panic. This has to be a mistake," Claudia stammered. "You're just a small-time consultant. You work out of a closet downtown." I smiled. "That's one of our satellite offices for boutique clients." The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. "Vanguard operates in 47 countries. We own this building, and as of today, through Easton's acquisition and the leverage consolidation of Delgado Global's outstanding debt." I clicked to the next slide. "We hold a controlling interest in your company." My presentation unfolded with precision. A 10-year roadmap. Confidential transactions, restructuring models, and Hell corporations, all strategically aligned under Vanguard's direction. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. Every chart was another's truth my family had never seen coming. "When I left Sterling & Co., you all thought I was running away," I said, looking directly at my uncle. "But even then I had contracts with 3 multinational firms. While you mocked my ambition, I built a global empire." Alejandro stared at the charts, stunned. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. "Easton is your company through a series of holdings and silent partners." "Yes," I said calmly, just like the venture firm that's been quietly acquiring Delgado's outstanding debt for the past 3 years. I turned to Claudia, whose silence was finally more telling than his usual bravado. "You thought this merger would save you? But the terms, the consulting fees, the leadership shift. I paused. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. They're not up for negotiation because this time I wasn't asking for a seat at the table. I owned it. I pulled out the final contract and placed it carefully on the table. Vanguard Strategies will assume full operational control of Delgado Global, I said, my voice calm and firm. We will restructure the management team and implement a new corporate strategy effective immediately. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. You can't do this? Raphael blurted out, his usual legal swagger faltering. The board would never approve. They already have. I nodded at Sarah, who tapped the tablet in his hand. The screens in the conference room lit up with a list of board members' signatures. The vote passed last night unanimously, I continued. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. Once they reviewed the full terms of the merger, including the details of Delgado's outstanding debt, they understood the consequences of not moving forward. Without this deal, the company would be facing immediate loan recalls and regulatory review. Uncle Alejandro stood slowly, the weight of his unraveling legacy visible in his hunched shoulders. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. Why, Sebastian? He asked quietly. Why go to all this trouble? I stepped away from the head of the table and walked slowly around it, looking each person in the eye. Because 10 years ago, you all taught me a valuable lesson, I said. You taught me that in our world, perception matters more than truth, that titles matter more than talent, that a polished name and designer suit earn more respect than quiet hard work. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. I paused beside Claudia, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. Last night, cousin, what did you call me? I asked. A nobody. After all these years, he flinched. Mascara smudged beneath his eyes, his silence louder than any response. Highs is today's reality, I said, returning to my seat. Delgado Global is now a subsidiary of Vanguard Strategies. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. I clicked to the next slide. Claudia, your position as Executive Vice President is being eliminated effective immediately. Raphael, your firm's legal services will no longer be retained. I turned to Uncle Alejandro. And you, I said with no malice, only resolution will be announcing your retirement this afternoon. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. The next hour unfolded in a haze of silent signatures and disbelief. Executives filed out one by one, defeated with folders in hand, and questions they couldn't bring themselves to ask. When only Claudia remained, I called out to his one last time. Next family reunion, I said. Remember, success doesn't always wear Chanel. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. After they left, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sarah walked over, handing me a warm coffee. Was it worth it? He asked softly. All these years of keeping your success hidden. I thought about the dismissive remarks, the endless patronizing offers to help me find a real job. Then I thought about the empire I'd built from scratch, the thousands of employees across continents, and the influence I could now wield for good. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. It was never about revenge, I said. It was about showing that this is more than one way to win, that you don't have to fit into their mold to matter. Over the next year, Delgato Global transformed under Vanguard's direction. We appointed leadership based on merit, not bloodlines. Claudia eventually found a mid-level operations role at a private firm. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Hopefully he gained something his resume never taught his: humility. Raphael's firm struggled after losing both Delgado and Vanguard as clients. And the family dynamics, those shifted too. The next reunion took place in a quieter venue, a garden, not a ballroom. This were fewer Rolexes, less posturing, and more honesty. Aunt Marcella even asked about my company, not with sarcasm this time, but with genuine interest, though he still winced every time someone mentioned Vanguard's strategies. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. My father, who had silently watched all those years, while his daughter was dismissed by his extended family, finally pulled me aside. "I'm proud of what you've built," he said, hugging me. "Not just the business, but how you handled it all." And he was right. Vanguard had become more than just a consulting firm. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. It had become a symbol for innovation, for ethical leadership, for transformation. In my office, I keep a small photo. It's from that first meeting. The moment Claudia realized who I was, not because I delight in his shock, but because it reminds me true, success isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about building something lasting. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. They mocked the little consulting firm for a decade called Me Naive a Dreamer. That firm just acquired its 100th company last week. But that's a story for another's family reunion. If my story resonated with you, don't scroll past. Talk to me. I wasn't supposed to succeed, not by the standards of my family or the world I was raised in. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. They told me I was wasting my potential, mocked my little consulting firm, and tried to wrap my worth in job titles and designer labels. But I kept building anyway, quietly, relentlessly, and now as we are. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told your dreams were too small or too unrealistic, drop a comment. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt had only sharpened his resolve. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Tell me where you're building from. Share your story. Let's create a space where ambition is celebrated, not silenced. Your voice matters even if they can't hear it yet. Trust me, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one changing the world behind the scenes. Highs is the advice I wish someone had told me. You don't need loud validation to make your work meaningful. He knew patience wasn't weakness, it was the deadliest strategy. The boardroom smelled of old money and older grudges. You don't need to be seen to be powerful. Let them underestimate you. Let them talk, and then build anyway. Build something so strong, so smart, so unshakable that by the time they recognize your brilliance, you're already 10 steps ahead. Success doesn't have to look how they expect. It just has to be yours on your terms. When the trap closed, this would be no way out. Sebastian had built his fortress in silence, brick by calculated brick.